I'm Roger Huberger. Welcome to Class 2 of Exploring the Visual Arts with Raj. Today's talk is about the 1863 French art salons and how they inspired the Impressionists to band together as a group. For ease of downloading, the presentation is split into two parts. Our classes are delivered also in a two-step manner. These lectures should be viewed in advance of us convening as a group. Questions are posed periodically as I go. Some will be rhetorical, with me answering them after a pause. All of these will become the outline for our Zoom session. As a reminder, I consider this course to be what I call art edutainment. Talking about art should be fun and entertaining, and along the way we can mix in some arts education. I also like to point out that while my language is deliberately casual, I assure you that my scholarship was rigorously prepared. As the title implies, the French salons of the late 1800s had and continue to have considerable impact on the art world. To give you an idea of their scope, the Art Institute of Chicago may have between 1 million and 1.5 million visitors in a year. The French salons could have up to 1 million visitors, and that's over just a 6-week run. The French art scene of the 1800s was greatly influenced by the Académie des Beaux-Arts, the School of Beautiful Arts. The Academy's teaching and critiquing standards influenced works created while attending the school and for years to come. The curriculum emphasized the study of the Greek and Roman classicism. Draftsmanship was a core skill, and it was to be mastered prior to introducing color. Once the classical style was mastered, students might evolve into producing works in the styles of Romanticism and Realism. But as you'll see, the academicians who juried admittance into the shows had a decided bias for works that represented the methods and subjects they taught. Participation in the Paris Salon was pivotal to an artist's success. Rejection from the Salon motivated the Impressionists to band together and pursue their own shows. So, what was the Académie des Beaux-Arts system? There was a hierarchy of subjects which illustrated the methods that were taught. This was also how they expected artists to proceed once leaving the academy. From the top, there were history paintings, which were most revered, and they illustrated high moral value. They could be religious or mythological. They were followed by portraits of non-historical figures, which were rated yet again above genre paintings of everyday life. Lastly, there were landscape and still life works. A fine arts education could be acquired through several paths. First would be attendance at the Académie des Beaux-Arts. Another route was the Royal Academy in the UK. However, there were additional avenues. There were private studios in Paris, or private academies, which were run by famed artists. One such educational studio, Antelier, was Galerie Glayer, another was Galerie Suisse, and the third, Galerie Julian. These more accessible venues also became the meeting point for some that would become among the most famous artists of all time. This painting by Bouguereau of the blind Homer being led by a shepherd is an example of the standard classically trained artists were intended to pursue. If you look at the inset, you'll see no brush strokes. It's almost as if it were a piece of marble. That smooth finish is what the instructors were going for. Artists studied from copies of great Greek and Roman works. In them, the body had been idealized, and again, structure was more important than color. The first salons of the mid-1600s started as student shows, and as they grew, they needed more space. Over time, the Louvre was used, and then later, in 1848, the event moved to the Palace, the Industry, which had recently been completed. So here's an example of high moral value art. This is Philippe de Champagne's 1648, Moses' Tablets of Law. I know this piece well because it's from the Milwaukee Art Museum, where I was a docent for 10 years. The artist was co-founder, along with Charles Lebrun, of the Académie des Beaux-Arts. He studied Rubens and the Flemish artist. He also picked up some Mannerist influences along the way. Champagne was later painter for Louis XIII and Marie de Medici. This was a commission work. We suspect that because it features the 10 Commandments in French. From a technical point of view, I want to highlight, and it's a shame you're not seeing this in person, but this is painted in what is called a dry-on-dry method, in which case, when you view the inset, you may notice the dirt under the figure's fingernails. You see wrinkles on the hand, and you get a sense of vascularity under his skin. This detail is possible because the hand is composed of between 6 and 8 layers of tints and dilute paints. Imagine painting the dirt first, letting it dry, followed by building a nail over the dirt using a translucent paint mix. Creating the wrinkles is achieved in a similar manner. This is quite a remarkable technique, and I hope someday you have the opportunity to see examples of this very rare method. Now here's some questions to consider. If this work is so remarkable, how come I'm just hearing about the artist now? And if this is art with a capital A, what should I make of Andy Warhol's soup can that might be in the next room? Here's an example of a history painting. This is by Jacques-Louis David, known for creating what is known as the neoclassical style. In it, he contemporized earlier classicism, and curiously, his teacher, though, had been the Rococo master François Boucher. This one is in the Louvre, where several Davids are on display in the same room. The Death of Socrates was in the 1787 Salons, and David had previously been awarded the Grand Prix de Rome, which is the biggest prize, in 1774. The painting on the left, The Oath of the Hierati, was painted during the build-up to the nearly 10-year-long French Revolution. The legend of the three brothers was interpreted by many at the time as representing their commitment to Rome ahead of their commitment to their family. Note, the father is being supportive, but along the right side one sees the women in the group in despair. The Hierati were chosen to represent Rome in a battle against the Curati brothers of nearby Alba. While a very efficient way to run a war, there was some fallout. One woman is a Hierati sister betrothed to the Curati, and another is a Curati woman who married a Hierati. So you see, everyone loses. We'll have more on this when we have our Zoom session. Yes, I know you can't make this stuff up. This is, in turn, a piece of Roman legend. In a switch, 9 years later, David paints a true event on the right, the death of his friend, the revolutionary Jean-Paul Marat. Marat's assassin, though, was not from the government, but from a competing revolutionary faction. Looking at these, can you see how artworks like this can have different interpretations when viewed over time? few other things to point out about the Salon. Landscapes could be included in the Salon, but most often it was because they included some figuration. Figures illustrated that the artist possessed a draftsman command of the brush. Remember, drawing and structure were more important than color. The work on the right you may also know as the Lion King. Gérôme's title was The Two Majesties. Both of these works, again, are from the collection of the Milwaukee Art Museum. When we move to our Zoom session, I'll share a fun anecdote about the Gérôme painting. Now, some events from real life were too real for the Salon. Figures could be working hard, but it was considered distasteful to display workers doing back-breaking work and slavishly toiling away. So knowing that, you can see Jean-Francois Millet on the left, Man with a Hoe. This is in the Getty Museum in LA. This worker is beat. He's doing back-breaking work and he seems to be just standing up to get a little bit of relief. That grueling work is not an acceptable topic. It struck too true to the populace and the government feared that it would lead to social unrest. Hence, works like this were not acceptable as they were too real. If you look to the right, you see the Salon award-winning Wood Gatherer by Jules Bastien-Lepage. The grandfather is working very hard and that appears to be a very heavy load on his back, but it looks like it's within his capability to manage it. Although his granddaughter is having so much fun, because she's having so much fun, you do not get the impression overall that he's struggling beyond his abilities. So this is not too much of a burden for him. This 6 foot by 6.5 foot work is the most popular painting in the Milwaukee Art Museum. So let me ask you, can you think of any contemporary art that is or was too controversial to display? So why have the Salon of the Rejected, Salon des Refugiés? In 1863, amazingly, 3,000 out of the 5,000 works submitted had been rejected by the jury. It became such an outrage that petitions were signed and pressures exerted. Napoleon III intervened and ordered for a Salon of the refused works to be established across the hall from the main event. Of the rejected works, 1,000 were on display. The artists had 2 weeks to decide were they going to pick up their rejected work or leave them and allow them to be on display. The rejections had good attendance and newspaper coverage, but it was not overall a rousing sales success. The work on the right is Symphony in White by Whistler. Yes, it's that Whistler. It's nearly 7 feet tall and about 3.5 feet wide. While spectacular, she had been rejected in both Paris and she was rejected before that at the Royal Academy show in London. Oddly enough, although she was rejected, she earned very positive press in Paris. So let me ask, how does this painting of his mistress, Joanna Hifferman, compare to the one he did of his mother? We'll discuss this topic more when we have our class session. And I'd like to know your thoughts. Would you have displayed or not? And what was your logic? And then why do you think only 1,000 of the original 3,000 works were put on display? Now we're moving on to a favorite topic of mine, Manet. You're going to be hearing a lot more about Edward Manet with an A versus Claude Monet with an O. I consider Manet to be the big dog of the 19th century modern art scene. He was from a well-to-do family. He studied art at Thomas Couture's studio instead of at the Academy. And as you can see on the bottom left, an example of Couture. It's generally composed with looser brush strokes than you might see at the earlier Academy works we looked at. Manet was accepted in the Salon from time to time, the Spanish singer in the upper center, whereas the painting on the right, the music on the Tuileries, was not accepted. It was criticized for having just dabs of black and white to characterize the people, and was altogether considered too slapdash, and that was not good art. The work on the bottom is Manet's Olympia. Many of you know about this painting by Manet. And here, the courtesan is staring right at you, and she's completely naked with the exception of the little bow around her neck. And she's entrapping us with her eyes. This work was accepted in 1865, 2 years after the big to-do that we're about to talk about with Manet's 1863 submission. This talk continues in part 2, where we will meet the Impressionist.